Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 679. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the master of speculation, the Duke of the Sultan of strategery, the bridge-defying, and recently was announced to be appearing in his own Just Imagine Stan Lee Creates Bridgeman, because he remains the elder statesman of the podcast, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Tales from Earth-6, a celebration of Stan Lee, and Wonder Woman Historia of the Amazons, issue number 3, as we close, book 3, actually, as we close off that particular story. I actually would love to see Stan Lee's take on Bridgeman.
That would be very scary.
We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service at InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what's going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Multiversity hardly screws up the DCU, issue 1 of 6, 50% off, only $2.49. We have the Unstoppable Doom Patrol, issue 1 of 6, 50% off, $1.99. And we have Waller vs. Wildstorm, issue 1 of 4, 50% off, only $2.99. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, the Coming Soon section is something that I've been using a lot more to make sure I'm not missing certain books. So I do my pre-ordering from DCBService.com, and there's times due to budget or just things that are being stacked where I just plain out miss them, that there's trade paperbacks, hardcovers, collected editions that I forget to grab. When I go to the Coming Soon section, I can log into my account and create a wish list. So, for example, coming up, this week is going to be Batman and Robin by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. It is going to be released on the 17th. We've got Batman Urban Legends Trade Paperback Volume 4 that's also going to be released. When I scroll down a little bit further, the Black Adam, the Justice Society Case Files. And this was all of the single-issue tie-ins that are prequels to the Black Adam movie. That's going to be coming out on the 24th. We've there's book after book that's going to be coming out from all companies. You can make your own customized wish list. That way you don't miss the books that you've been looking for, and you can get them at a discount. So I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing in today's show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Our Speeding Bullets segment is going to return next week. Due to the amount of content we had on this episode, Jim and I were unable to record that for this episode. It will be back next week. Thank you for everyone that's been posting articles. We will be shouting them out and talking about them next week. Without further ado, let's talk some comics.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
Our first discussion is on Wonder Woman Historia, the Amazons. The writer is Kelly Sue DeNock, with art by Nicholas Scott, colorist Annette Kwok, Kwok, letters by Clayton Cowles, cover artist by Nicholas Scott and Annette Kwok, variant cover by Yannick Piquet. The editors are Chris Conroy and Andrea Shea. The publication designed by Darren Robinson and publication production by Sandy Alonso, with, of course, characters based on characters created by William Moulton Marston.
And it's Kelly Sue DeConnick, and it's Yannick Paquette, I believe. Only because I saw in 2 different sites they had pronunciations of them, so it's not that I'm going out of my way to try to correct you on it, just because I've seen it recently. This book is stunning. This is an example of, to me, what Black Label's all about. I'm glad this is book. I was sad at the end when I realized, oh my gosh, wait, this is it, book 3 of 3.
Yes.
These have been nice releases. Like, when we get these, they feel like they're substantial and they're art. This is something when, people, if there's anybody out there who still questions whether or not comic books are art, my gosh, you should take a look at this, and the storytelling depth, the visual pieces. I'm a huge fan of Nicola Scott. Her work, she's on my short list. If she is not my favorite artist right now, she is certainly in the top 5. And, I tend to teeter-totter from time to time as you see brand new work from a particular favorite. But she has remained from the first moment I got a chance to really enjoy her artwork to today, when she's on a book, there is something special about it, and there's something about her artwork that speaks to me. And this is an absolutely stunning example of what I love about her artwork. I love that this book in the back had that section where she was talking about some of the creation of it and her philosophy. And I think it's cool because she was mentioning the fact that she isn't really like a digital artist. She prefers, some of the traditional methods. And I actually love the mixture of art now that we get in comics, where we get some artists that are full digital, we get some artists that are hybrid, we get some artists that are more traditional. And I think that's important because it's art, right? So I think being able to see the different methods of creation pay off into the pages, it's what keeps the books being fresh and different and unique. And when you get a different artist on, they have their own unique stamp. I really love the commentary piece in the back. And if you skip over those, do yourself a favor and check it out in this one, because I thought that's a nice little value add for me, particularly on this book, because I enjoyed the artwork so much. But I'm looking at the cover right now and I could go off on just how visually stunning this is. We've got, Hera right on the front cover with this majestic look about her. I mean, the ornate details on her headgear straight on through. That has to take forever to put together, but the payoff is just how stunning it looks. And she references a lot the color work that is done in this particular book, and I couldn't agree more. I think that this is a great example of a book where writer, artist, colorist, the whole creative team really has just gelled together to recreate something that's special. These were growing up, when prestige format hit, you would get this kind of content, this kind of quality of work. And it was a step up. It was a different paper quality. And nowadays to see them, I'm looking at it on my, iPad Pro, and this is one of those times where I think there's rumors of a bigger one. I'm like, boy, how would I carry that around? I'll find a way. Because this is an example of a book I would like to see even larger than it is, because it's just stunning. I just that you're going to hear that a lot from me on this one. This one just stands out to me as being just breathtaking in its view. And there's a lot of things to talk about and unpack in this story, because they went in some directions that I don't feel contradict anything that we've read, but add this layer of Amazons covering up what was a moment that they're not proud of, a moment of shame almost in some of their decision, where I think it's going to be fun talking about the tough choices, but necessary choices that were made by Hippolyta in general in this, that made me understand the complexities of that character even more. And that's something when you can come back up and have an opportunity to see something that adds another layer to a history that you've already known without really contradicting. Because I don't know, we'll have to talk about, do you feel this really contradicts anything that we've read before, or just adds another layer? I'd be curious to get your thoughts. What did you think of this first impressions out of the gate? Obviously for me, I'm foaming at the mouth with how cool I love this book. Where were you at on this?
My opinion on this is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I absolutely love this. This one for me was just an absolute joy to read, to look at, to, just savor, and everything you talked about, like with just the beauty of the artwork, the crafting of the story, are the two things that I absolutely really loved about this. Because one, I could sit back and just, my art read through could just be as simple as and just enjoy myself. Or you focus on the story that's been told over these issues and just how it built who the Amazons are, what they're about, but also define who the gods are in this. And it just this crafting of a story where it's the multiple level of intrigue, and the intrigue within the gods, intrigue within the Amazons, intrigue within the people, within the parties that each one of them are getting involved in this. This was just one of those, again, wonderfully crafted stories that has a beautiful backdrop. And for me, this very easily 100% could be the true history of the Amazons. This could be a black label as it is, where it's an alternate, world. They very easily could take this and modify what we know currently in continuity and say, this is what actually happens. And I love that in parts of this, they're like, this is what happened. Most people remember it differently, though. And I love just that little nuance that they give in there, basically giving them the possibility of being, the true origin that we have. Whereas this is just the variations on it. And there's so many choices that were made on how to craft what the gods look like. And even the gods themselves talk about how this is just a physical form that they're choosing. They can change at will. This is not their true form. This is just a form they choose. Like later on, when Hera's got a bruise, she chooses to keep the bruise on, because of, everything going on in the story. And any of these gods. So we have these images in our head of what these gods traditionally look like. No, they're completely thrown out. Why? Because this is what the gods at this point in time chose. Hera has more of a traditional look that we're used to, whereas Zeus, they completely went over, completely changed Zeus. He's not the old white guy with the big white beard throwing lightning bolts. No, he's got that really cool physical form to him. Even like when they threw Hercules into this, he has a traditional look, but it's been modified a little bit. He's, a giant by comparison to what we're used to. So they really did some cool stuff with, again, just taking the lore, taking the legends, and tweaking it a little bit to fit this story. And it really 100% fit this story.
We saw that in Brian Azzarello's run on Wonder Woman, too.
Yeah.
Where, really different looks for the gods. So, this is a concept that's already been introduced in Wonder Woman lore where they can take different forms based on timing, based on perception, based on eras, and I really liked that. And I love the freedom that they did with this, because the takes that they did on them were stunning. Especially when you see in that opening page, you get to see each of the gods laid, the female gods laid out, the ones that are the tribes of the Amazons. And I really liked seeing that interplay and those choices on it. You made an interesting point as far as, this could be a Black Label story. This could be a story that's overlaid into current continuity. I think because of the fact that they add certain elements of reasoning why there would be, like, I'm going to jump to it. There's a period of Amazon shame where Hippolyta has to make a choice that I think is as a leader, you've got to make sometimes that tough choice where do you put your pride or the protecting the continuation of your race, your people, and in this case, you had to make a choice of the Amazons could be wiped out here. And there's a very real possibility that's where this is going to go. Do we put that pride ahead of maintaining and protecting our people, our culture, having them still exist? Or do we have some of them go underground, again, unleashing them onto the world like she did? And it really sets up this whole thing that even with the resolution of this story, there are Amazons that are out in the world that went and hid out there to survive. It was a very, very interesting choice. And I think as a leader, she did the right thing, the tough choice. Sometimes as a leader, there's a tough choice where you go against, you got to sit there and say, okay, this is what we believe in. This is our code. At what point in time do you go, we're going to take a hit here for this one, but it's the right kind of hit because protecting our people has to be a priority. And I loved that choice where it's not clean, but it was honest, and sometimes the honest choices are the ones where it's not black and white. There's shades of gray in it. And you could also see how that would lead to, this is what really happened. And we were being shackled. Our freedom was taken away. And you could see how that story would unfold very, very differently, where it becomes legend instead of what actually happened. I take this very much as you could say this is what actually happened, but nothing that's been written before didn't happen because that's how they were telling the story based on how it was handed down over generations. And you could see how that story would get, like a game of telephone, let's shave off some of the rough edges of this story and what we actually did. And especially the death of like Heracles and stuff like that. You could really, alter that and go, well, this is what he would have done to us had he won. And this is why we had to rebel. This is what led, changing the justification for what they did. I was reading through this and I'm like, boy, they're really making some changes here. And I'm like, but are they? It's an interesting sort of debate you can get into in this, where you could really say this story actually happened, but the way that the events were handed down over time allowed for those other stories to take place. I'm a fan of this when you do this kind of thing where, like you said earlier, this could be completely Black Label and you could leave it off as its own thing and just take this as a great story. Or you can very easily fold this into continuity and go with it and have it not really contradict anything that's happened before. It just added another layer to it. I like both options on this. And that's something I think that's where a story becomes. The story's important enough to me that I'm trying to fit it into continuity because I like this story that much.
Yeah. Oh, completely agree. And it's funny, as you're going, I'm nodding my head because of just looking at, just even when we get started and we get opening, where I loved how they draw Olympus. I really do love the look and just the styling on how they shift over from when you're in the world of man to the world of Olympus. And even just like the notion of, again, from the very beginning when they're talking about, the forms they choose to take, the messengers they choose to use to watch and then monitor to monitor the world of man, just this interaction, this play between these characters in 3 issues. And granted, they're 3 oversized issues, but in 3 issues, they've really developed who these different people are to the point where you really get an affection towards these characters, other than just the main. Hippolyta's the main character. Because let's be honest, she is, because she's the queen, and this is kind of her story, but it's the story of the Amazons. Mm-hmm. And I love that this isn't the story of Hippolyta. This is the birth of the Amazons. She's a key player, but you really do get into who these different people are and what roles they're playing in it. And just it's really it's one of those things where when I was done reading, I wanted the continuing adventures.
Yep.
I wanted to continue seeing. I wanted to see how the Amazons dealt with the ending, basically where they're locked in prison. And that's a concept I absolutely love about this, how the Paradise Island isn't just this paradise to save them from the world of man. This was their prison. And I love just that notion, that concept of it. Because I would love to see the journey of them going from being prisoners to them saying, this is paradise. This is wonderful. This is the greatest existence in the world. Because we see, in the modern stories where they're like, hey, Paradise Island, this is paradise for them. This is a great place. That transition will eventually happen within time when they realize the gifts. It's a gift, really, but I love. That's those stories I'd love to see. And then, of course, in this universe, I'd love to see if they ever do decide to have Diana go into the world of man. Because, yes, she's an Amazon, but she wasn't created as a prisoner. She was created by the female gods. And so could be why she's able to leave. And there's so many different stories that this universe could continue telling that I really 100% want to see that.
See, it's funny. We read this differently in the sense that you're focused on it being this universe, whereas I feel like this is in continuity.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're wrong. And I want to be very clear. This isn't like a right or wrong. I actually think one of the nice things about this story is you can, like any great story, you can read it and interpret it and experience it the way that is personal to you. I couldn't echo what you're saying more in the sense that I would love to see this continue. And what I'd love to do is for them to continue telling the tales of the history of the Amazons. I'd love to see them tell Diana's story from this perspective. It be in continuity, where we find out certain elements maybe of Diana's story that we didn't see before. This reminds me a lot of the Perez run, in the sense that when George Perez took over Wonder Woman and relaunched the book, there was this development of lore that happened in it, where there were things that clearly were foretold before in the Wonder Woman stories, but now they were clarified, fleshed out, added more details, added a lot more about the gods. And to your point, it wasn't just a Diana story. Diana was a pivotal part and a central focus, but this book is filled with so many pods. Like, I'm looking at the pages with Tarpeia right now. And what a great story she had, where she's still dealing with the guilt of circumstance, where she was a pawn, really, in a lot of machinations going on the outside, where she was doomed for those events to take place, to ultimately be the catalyst for this war that's coming. And I love that there are Amazons, including Hippolyta, who recognize the fact that this isn't all on her. That's too simple. This was something that was coming, that just she wound up being the bomb that exploded.
Yeah.
But there were so many other places where that could have happened. And I really loved that feel to the story of it. You mentioned Olympus, and I'd like to go back to the artwork really quick and maybe just generally talk about the artwork throughout. One of the things that I really, really love about Nicholas Scott's artwork is a lot of times I get focused in artwork on character. And there's times where there's terrific artists where, and I think it's books like this is where it stands out because, you know, when you're on a regular monthly comic, you're on deadlines and you've got to do a lot of establishing shots, right? Where we're establishing the location, but because of time, after we've established that, we have to be judicious in how we use the panels that follow afterwards because we've got to meet our deadline. And I always appreciate that. With books like this, I'm assuming the deadlines are longer, you know, allowing a little bit more attention to detail. I'm looking at the page where Tarpeia is climbing the tree. You know, she's up at the tree.
Yeah.
And just marveling at just how stunning the landscape is, which artists don't always have a chance in comics to breathe. And when you see the snake come in with the special effects going on there, it just, the whole page is just incredibly stunning in what it does, not just with the character models themselves and the facial expressions, but the overall landscape and action and motion that's happening is just stunning. It's page turn after page turn of just stunning art throughout, where I'm not focused on sometimes the pieces that, and I marvel at this. Anybody who's on a monthly comic and having to meet those monthly deadlines, I appreciate the fact that these artists are able to take those establishing shots and keep us mentally moving forward as if that is in the background and fleshed out on panels where it's not, because they have to just keep moving us through. When you get books like this where they've had a little bit more time to breathe, you look a couple pages down, you see the page with the bears opening up, and you see just multiple page of outdoor landscapes and different structures that have been constructed. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Like, I want to go to this place. I've referenced before that I'm excited that there's a Wonder Woman game. I haven't heard a lot since the announcement that there's going to be a Wonder Woman game, but when I've always referenced the God of War games in reference to seeing a great Wonder Woman game, it's because of things like this. I want to run around with a character in this world that Nicholas Scott has crafted here, like her drawings of it. I would love to see this 3D animated and fleshed out and run around in this world with a character and like do stuff. Because it's a living, breathing, rich world that she took me to. And whether or not this world is ever fleshed out that way, it's not whether or not it happens, it's that you want to, right? That your time with this world is not enough. I want more. And you and I are both in the same place where at the end of this issue, I was like, that was fantastic. I want more of this. I want to see more. And we've had a series right now where every issue's had a different talented art team on each issue. They have done a really great job of taking us through eras of the history of the Amazons, where I've felt myself after every issue just wanting more, wanting to experience more of this world. And that's what these Black Label books should do. This is the best of the best right now. We are getting something of a very different caliber that was crafted to be a special project. This is not a monthly book. And I love monthly books. I need monthly books. I need that storytelling delivery. I need that consistent sense of continuity and forward motion. It's what I love about comics. I also need this. I need these special projects that make me go, wow, this team did something that made me just drop my jaw. And this is that kind of work. I mean, they're stunning pieces. The birds flying in the sky, you know, where you see close-ups of them with the moon in the background. I'm just like, whoo, the attention to detail there. They feel like they're living and breathing, like they could reach out. Like, I want this animated with quality animators who are able to recreate this kind of artwork. I want to see the motion that in my mind's eye, these pages are taking me through. Even though I'm not seeing the motion, I am seeing this bird move. And that's something that is really hard to do. And she did a bang-up job. The whole creative team the art team did just a bang-up job of making this world come to life for me. The smoke effects. I mean, you see the smoke's coming out of this pyre around this bird, and you see, like, I loved the fact that the smoke felt like like real smoke, where the lighting effect was having an effect on the smoke at various stages. Yes.
Actually, your sentiment, yes. I'll tell you, as I said, my art read-through is just as much of a joy as all other read-throughs for this reason. Of everything you were talking about, I'm just nodding my head along with you, just going, yeah, let Sean go, because all I'm going to say is, yes, I agree. Because some of this, one of the things I always love is really good facial expressions. And that's something Nicholas Scott does beautifully. But also, as you talked about, just the background stuff and just the fact that she had plenty of time to actually really do some crafting and really do some artwork on this. This is a series that I really want an absolute, like 100%.
Oh.
And I want more pages, and give me, I want the size of a coffee table, really good, so we can go in deep. And it's already oversized, but I want it even larger. I want it even more. Give me more is what I'm saying. But
I'm hearing you say you want it to be the actual coffee table, like we open up the book.
I want where it takes 2 pages, 2 hands to turn a page. That's the kind of book I want on this.
I want a book where I need a neighbor to turn the page with me. Can you come over, because I want to read this, and I'll pay you. It's going to take a few hours, but
well, actually, no. What you do is you call me. I'll come over. Hey, it's time to read. Let's read it. Okay, and we'll
See, but here I'm trying to get the neighbor that might be mildly disinterested, because then I can focus on reading the book. Like, if you're there, I'm gonna have to compete with ready
to turn.
I'm looking at the page. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, one thing I want when they were getting ready for war, and I love the fact how they identify this, saying, "Hey, each prepare in their own way according to her tribe." I love the fact that they still are breaking down the 6 different tribes, how they're going to look at things differently, how they're going to prepare for it based on, their God, and I really did love the fact that they do this. And then they have the 7th tribe, which is just the people, and I've always, that was something when they introduced that concept, back in issue 1, I was like, man, that's a neat idea. And they continue going through, and it does show why Hippolyta becomes the final queen. This issue really does give it, because right now there are multiple queens. This is laying out really why Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazons. And I love that notion, and I love just how they gave birth to it, but also just throughout this, they keep, it's again, they really show them, each individual tribe, but they're still united in a common cause. They are Amazons. And I love just that concept from beginning through end on this book.
Heavy as the crown. And Heracles makes a comment, about there being 87 queens, early on. And what was interesting is and they're all leaders. They all step up. But Hippolyta's the one that has to make the tough decision, and it's interesting to see what sets her apart and gives her just, it's not taking anything away from the other queens, but there's a tough choice that she has to make, that it's the hard one that nobody else could make. And that's, I think, sometimes, that is where the heavy crown analogy comes in. You reference the battles, and I don't want to I love the stunning battles. I mean, it's obviously something in any comics, what you like seeing is the majesty of action and things like that. What I love is how they build the calm before the storm. Like, we've got the pages I was referencing earlier where it ends with the united in understanding, and you flip over and it's something terrible is coming. And you see Hippolyta and Helene sitting on by that twisted tree on the edge of that cliff area, overlooking everything with a sunrise, I guess, coming up. And it was absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Leading into Heracles riding in with that sun behind him. Yeah. The attention of detail of his steed, of his chariot, everything was just absolutely perfect, where you just knew this is going to be huge.
And I love the grasshopper and the ants, that they interwove within this wonderful battle with the queens of the Amazons versus Heracles. Just the notion, because by himself, if they fought one-on-one, he would destroy them.
Yep.
But They fought as a group, and the same thing like with this, with the mantis and the ants. Takes one out, no problem. Then all of a sudden, all these other ants just start swarming it, and the ants win that way. And it's the same thing with the Amazons. Again, brilliant on just the overlay of showing the ants as the different queens start stepping up. And I loved how even he's like, how many queens have you? Where he's laughing, and then he kind of realizes, I got an issue here. And that battle sequence. I always talk about just the beauty of chaos, the beauty of battle, and just how, capturing that moment. They did a brilliant job with capturing just that, the bloodiness, the horrific nature of that battle. And I love the look on his face, in the middle of that, it's a, multiple circle. It's the two circles, the one showing the ants devouring the grasshopper, but then they show him being devoured, being defeated by the Amazons. And just the look of, uh-oh, on his face is absolutely brilliant. I love these pages, just the setup to them, the layout, the story behind it, and then just the physical beauty of it was something I was like, this is awesome.
Here's something that they did that doesn't always happen. The reaction afterwards. I thought those pages, starting with "And the Deed is Done," where you just see the wide variety of mixed reactions from the Amazons. I think there's this sense of, what did we just do? What does this mean? What's going to happen? I mean, they chopped him up into tiny little pieces. I mean, there is no coming back from that. There is this sense of, this changes everything, right?
Big time.
He fought hard and died well. They're even saying that. Yet, there's also that mixed emotion of, what he would have done to us if he had won. That goes back to the legend that we read, right, in the comics. So that's the part where I'm like, well, I can see how the story would change where it's a justification. Look what he did to us. This is why we did what we did, versus he didn't actually do it because they didn't give him a chance. And you could see how that story could be told differently over time depending on who the storyteller is, right? So that's where I'm like, this could be something that is told as Black Label, or you could easily blend this into continuity. Well, what really happened was this, as they're putting his head in a bag. I really, really love this sense of scale, though. To your point, you can see how, yes, these are mighty warriors, but his size, his skill, his scale, one-on-one, wouldn't have happened. They would have lost. But as a group, they were able to overcome him, and it set something in motion that is incredibly dangerous afterwards. And I love that foreboding. I love that they gave multiple pages to the aftermath of the battle with him, because that's something you can't always get in a monthly book, because you've got also the economics of page count. In this, you were able to say, when we know this is going to be expanded storytelling, let's really talk about the aftermath, because you need to in this. And they set his body back on his chariot. as a form of respect. And I get what they were doing. They were like, let's try to honor this the way that we should, so that we were not giving up who we are as a people. And that was something that stuck with me.
Well, and I love the fact that, because, within the culture, to leave the body to rot is an offense. Mm-hmm. And that's what they do with the slavers and the brigands that they kill. They just let the bodies rot. With him, they wanted to show respect.
Yeah.
Now, Zeus didn't take it that way. Zeus took it as an affront that they mailed back his body in pieces to him, and took that as an ultimate insult. I love the fact that, once again, they're doing what they think is honorable, but the gods don't see it that way. Zeus doesn't see it that way. The whole birth of the Amazons were because of this. The fact that the gods didn't look at the women as their equals, and they were just dismissed and allowed these horrific atrocities to occur to them. That's why the female gods created the Amazons, for justice, for this, for this. And again, Zeus does not understand. Zeus can't comprehend what they're doing, why they're doing it. To him, this is an insult to him. This is an affront to him. And I love the fact that, how this all plays out. You 100% see it coming. Even when they're sending it back, and before I flip the page and you see that great no with the lightning flashing, you knew, oh, this is not going to go well. But they took their time. They showed it. Then they just showed that army just swarming down to the Amazons. I'm like, oh man, this is outstanding.
Zeus is particularly great in this because I think the layers of the Amazons, and the thing I loved about their reactions was every one of the Amazons had like a little bit of a different reaction, and some of them realized that like honoring them and sending this back, like he wouldn't do that, which also was a sign of they're also not going to take this the way that you're thinking. Some people were on the side, we should do this. This is what we do as Amazons. We should go, and people were everywhere in between, right? They went from one extreme to the other and everyone in the middle. And I think there's truth to that, right? I wasn't surprised by Zeus's reaction, but I also get why the Amazons did what they did. And I loved that. I loved the power of getting to see the motivations, because that's very real, right? Like, I felt that these people were people that were living, breathing, vibrant. Like, I understood the debates. I feel like you and I could be plopped into that debate and we would be weighing in our own ways. And similar to how we do here when we're talking about a comic, there's going to be things we completely agree upon. Even if we agree, the how we agree and why we agree might be vastly different and might impact our leanings towards what the right decision is. I loved that reality of this, right? It felt like an honest, living group. This was just great writing. And it was something that I thought just unfolded really well. The seeing the sun's head dropped in front of Hera like that, and like her reaction to it, naming your bastard after me, was quite the touch.
Yeah.
I mean, and their like tete-a-tete of jealousy was something that, I mean, that's a marriage that is just really powerful. And I love the way that played out. You nailed it before when you were saying that this is not just a book about Hippolyta. It so is not. And yes, she is you could make the argument that in this movie, she is the star. But the supporting cast is just as important. And boy, there's a lot of awards going to be handed out by this supporting cast.
Just the banter back and forth between Zeus and Hera in that sequence was absolutely, again, brilliant. And I love the moment where he's like, he's in pieces, aren't we all? That right there, the look on those two faces, just that the way they did the artwork, where you really get to see their face overlaying the gruesome battle going on. And then you flip the page and it's the big slap, that Zeus has on Hera, along with the fall of the one, Katya, along with her fall in battle. I was like, oh man, again, brilliant on the overlay of what's going on with the gods, what's going on with the people, and then just that the birth of the pure rage in Hippolyta, when it's just, again, it's more than just, justice. This is about vengeance. This is just about pure, unadulterated rage. And I loved how they really showed that in her with, again, changing the art coloring, shifting from a solid coloring to that red heavy tone, where they're just talking about just the vicious nature of the warrior that she has to do. She has to lose who she becomes and become pure rage. And that's, how the Amazons win this first battle. Now, granted, there's going to be many wars after this. There's going to be many, but this first one kind of was a victory. Heavy costs, but it was a kind of victory. And I love how they keep this going, where they're like, yeah, the first one's done, but there's going to be more. There's going to be a continue on. Zeus is going to step up by bringing not just the regular army. He's now going to start having gods on the battlefield. So I love just how this story kept progressing and progressing and progressing with each layer. With each time you're flipping the page, you're showing just how much more it's going against the Amazons, how much more the gods are directly stacking against them. It was a brilliant usage of just that, the underdog mindset. The Amazons throughout this have always been the underdog. They've had to stick to the shadows, stay out of the sun so Apollo doesn't see them acting, and do all this kind of stuff. Now we're even taking that, the underdog, and even escalating it even more. I love seeing that, because that makes your best heroes of your story, when the odds are so mounted against them that you're looking at going, there's no way they can win this. I love seeing that.
And the question is, what does winning mean? Like, even if they can, what do you lose along the way? Because we already know from what we've seen with Hera's storyline as it continues and progresses that Zeus is ready to go nuclear with this, right? And bring things to fruition that weren't supposed to happen for centuries. So, Hera's already referencing that piece. But you're seeing Hippolyta, and in reflection, you're seeing her on the battlefield, just surrounded by bodies, just dead bodies all over the place. And afterwards, that period of remembrance where there's no time to give the proper burials, the proper acknowledgement of each of these people that have died and what they've meant. They're losing elements of their culture by not even honoring these people and making sure the memories of who they are, what they did, live on beyond them, right? Because that's part of when you say goodbye is the ability to be able to tell stories and share things that maybe other people didn't know. And, you and I have both been through family remembrances where, there's people that are guests there. Myself, and at your families, I was a guest and had the opportunity to hear stories and things that I'd never heard before that I'll always remember. And I think it's an important part of the process. Those stories then continue on and a person in a way you didn't know them before. This is a culture that is being wiped out. I love that they went from that to an exploration of their arts culture, right? Where we're seeing a comedy being put on by some of the actors in the Amazons. And you're seeing that artistic culture. And that, if this war keeps going, this will be lost. All of this culture that is being developed, the storytelling, will be lost. And we've got somebody who is a potential storyteller that is one of the actors that you're like, this person will never tell their stories. They'll never be around to tell their stories. Hippolyta now is seeing the bigger picture of, we're trying to win. What are we trying to win? And what does winning mean? And how far do we go to, is the ultimate winning that we don't compromise, we don't give in, we don't bend what we believe in order to survive? Or, do we go to that level where it's like, if we go down to the last Amazon, we go down swinging, we become legend based on sticking to who we are? Or do we protect this culture? And where does that balance come in? And that's what weighs heavily on the leader. And that means so much more in this story because of the fact that we see it fleshed out, right? You can't always see that fleshed out in a story where you get to see what will be lost if she doesn't make a decision. So as readers, we are feeling Hippolyta's decisions before her, and why she as a queen is standing out from the other queens because she's the one that's faced with this decision. She's seeing this. She has this revelation, and we're seeing it unfold. We know what's going on with Hera and Zeus. Hippolyta's on the ground, seeing the aftermath of all of this and what is yet to come. And I loved that. I mean, what a rich story in seeing that piece fold, because I actually cared about her decision. I was sitting there going, ooh, and I felt the weight of it. That's something you don't always feel in those decisions, is the weight of leadership and the weight of decisions in war. This story nailed that in a way that it's been a long time since I've seen a story that really made me feel that level of weight in it. And that was really, really well done. It's hard to do.
Oh, big time. And I love how, as this play is going on, the army of man is swarming in on them. So they're taking this moment of laughter, of joy, while Zeus, there's no taking the foot off the gas. He's full on, going in, and even eventually, as we see, Apollo directly gets involved in the fight. Yeah. So now the gods are directly getting involved in the fight, not just his army, not just Zeus's armies, his army of men. It's now the gods directly firing. And I love just, again, how it makes it's an escalation of the battle. And also, as you said, it adds to that weight that Hippolyta is dealing with. She's really seeing her people get slaughtered. It's going beyond just the simple, a simple death and destruction is one thing. But as you said before, it's a complete erasure of them from the world.
Yeah.
And I love just how they keep escalating it and they keep growing. And again, you see just the code of the Amazons. They're like, we're not hanging back. We're not holding back. We're not running. We're fighting. We are Amazons. We fight. And I love just seeing the fact that they're going up against gods and unbelievable powers. And they're like, no, we don't stop. We keep going.
Am I the only one that wanted to play Punch Buggy with Apollo?
Yes.
Volkswagen. Because I just thought it was like he was just such a brat in the whole thing. And I actually thought that was well played. I mean, I thought the grandeur of the gods, but also the fact that they have this power and based on their age, their experience, their personality, what they're the god of, it drove a lot of their behavior. And you could see how just an event could kick someone off on a pathway that they're now doing things that they're treating them like ants. They like the ant analogy earlier was a good one where, I'm just annoyed at this point and I'm going to keep causing trouble. And you see how, he's got members of his own family, based on Hippolyta's urgings who are lying to him and trying to act as a catalyst to change the game a bit. And that internal politics and manipulation going on with the gods, I thought was really intriguing. Like that was a layer to this story that I thought was really, really great. It reminded me of things like, Clash of the Titans and stuff like that, where it was, following Perseus was just as interesting as following what the gods were doing and how that whole interplay was happening. I thought this did a really great job of capturing that kind of thing with this particular group.
Oh, big time. Big time. And again, one of the things that really stands out is always, as we've been saying from the beginning, the artwork. And they really, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to probably say it a couple more times, just the horrors and beauty and the chaos of battle. And I loved how they did a brilliant job in capturing all. Because again, you tell a story is one thing, but to physically see it, on a flat page, and have it not be flat, have it be fluid and motion, and you can kind of understand, as these gods are charging into the battle, I can see it and I can hear and I can feel the energy behind it. That's one of the things I loved about this. But in the end, they did the beautiful pacing where you had these big, massive explosions and death and carnage. And then they just pick a time, let's go back to Olympus. Let's go back there. And I love how they did that brilliant balance. Because, again, it's got to be a game. It's not just a physical beatdown. There is the game behind it. There is the strategy. There is the various, just the influence and whatnot of the gods. I loved how they played that and how they showed that.
The horse sequence was interesting. Seeing Hippolyta go full circle, where all of a sudden now we've got this horse. And I love how she's even making the compliment, the inner mind. Is this hubris or humility if I get on that mount? And I loved that kind of internal debate with herself, considering the situation. Everything, we get to see, like, everything kind of come full circle where you see what would please you. I should give them a gift. You see the gods taking an animal-like form. In that situation, I thought that part was just gorgeous. Where we saw the buck, we saw the dog, we saw the owl, we saw the snake. Typical forms that we're used to seeing the gods take as their. I don't know if that was really happening or they were images that were appearing in Hippolyta's head, but I just loved the majesty of that. That was a beautiful sequence.
Oh God, yeah, and even just like right before when Hippolyta does that, I love how she releases some of the Amazons, and tells them, hey, go run, get out of here. And I love the notion they're saying, you'll send us back to the world as sheep? No, you are lions in sheep's clothing. As seeds that from your knowledge, generations of warriors may grow. As your queen, I charge you with this sacred duty. I loved that sequence there. Because again, it's creating the mythos behind the lost Amazon tribes. Each one of those are all the different tribes that are going out now. So again, within continuity, this story could very easily play out. This could be the birth of those different tribes that we've seen. And then going right from that to, again, the burial sequence, just that whole sacred, that she was doing with her, with the young girl, and then eventually going on to Olympus. For me, these three sequences, back to back, boom, 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 was absolutely brilliant in the storytelling, brilliant in visual display. It was amazing. I love just how each one is so dramatically different. You know, how you have the earth-based stuff, and then it shifts and we start shifting into the gods, and then we're shifting into, for lack of better terms, the trial by Zeus. You know, where it goes from the more calmer, you know, beautiful god thing to just this horrific, angry Zeus who's mounting over her. And I love the fact that as the gods are, you know, bickering back and forth, Hippolyta doesn't lose who she is. Hippolyta stands tall in the face of the gods, saying, "Hey, you're wrong here. You know, you're the problem here." And I loved seeing just, again, that strength of character of who she is.
Yeah, it's really challenging because in this moment, her relationship with the Amazons changes forever, right?
Yeah.
Because it changes the whole story of Themyscira. It isn't that they divorced themselves from the world of man because they wanted to. They divorced themselves from the world of man because they were imprisoned there.
Yeah.
And it was a punishment. And that's an interesting sort of thing. I could see how their culture continues to grow and, you know, they've developed a mythos and a justification maybe to survive and keep moving on. I could see how the story would change as a way to emotionally maybe deal with what has happened, you know, in the sense of betrayal. The story of Tarpeia is tragic, where she had to give up Tarpeia in that moment. That was, I to your point of wanting to continue on in the story, what does life look like for Tarpeia after this? Like, I so wanted to see that. I actually also love that there's something to not seeing that. You know, I mean, where in your mind, you're kind of like fleshing out the story. Hippolyta was ready to end it all.
Yeah.
Like, at that point in time, her guilt, she was ready to just end it all. And very similar, talk about coming full circle, you know, a child brought her out of the water, you know, and Diana being born from Hera was the light, the purpose, the meaning to help her carry on and to live on. I loved how Diana's name was like etched in, you know, did Hera do that or did she do that? You know, as far as the name for Diana, I'm assuming that was Hera who put.
Actually, what's her name? The other god that's there.
Oh yeah.
She's actually the one who carved it in the sand. You can see her starting to carve it. I liked how.
Oh, with the stick. Yes, yeah. I see it there.
I like how they did that. Where, you know, as this is playing out, but also it's funny because there's the two origins of Diana. One is made out of clay, where the gods give all her energy to it. The other is she, you know, Hippolyta and Zeus, you know, make this child. You know, and you know, sometimes, you know, I've gone back and forth. I really like the story of, you know, her being the daughter of Zeus, where she gets her, that's how she has all these powers. But also, I do like in this story how it is all the female gods giving the energy, you know, and Hera even giving life, and then all the other gods giving her a blessing, and some part of her power you can see comes from the different gods, and that's why she's so much more powerful. And Artemis
naming her.
Yeah, you know, and I like that. I like this story. It's funny how this played out. For me, this right here, I like the made out of sand, you know, made out of clay Diana. You know, and normally I'm a fan of the daughter of Zeus, because I'm like, that's, you know, but for some reason, the way this story's laid out, the way everything they built to this, because they made all the gods and their direct relationship with the Amazons mean something. This final act really does make it more dramatic, make it more, you know, defined as to why Diana is Diana. She truly is, you know, flesh from the gods. And I really love just seeing that. And it's why I keep saying I want to see more of this story continue, because there's so many different pieces that they can tell. Because eventually, how does Hippolyta, you know, get better with her people? Because it's not just the people, the Amazons who are there, it's all the ones who died. They were resurrected and brought back onto Paradise Island. They were brought back into the prison, you know? And so it's really just this serious, major punishment. But I want to see the Amazons work through it and say, this isn't a punishment, this is a gift. You know, and is Diana the reason they see it as the gift? Or is it just them through life or them through living? Or I don't know. And that's the stuff I'm like, I want to know.
See, it's the daughter of Zeus thing is... It's an interesting that you like that one so much, and I'm not disputing that. As far as your everyone obviously latches onto certain stories. I never disliked that story, but it was a direct contradiction to what was always at the core of Wonder Woman for me. It was this idea that this was this child that was crafted by the gods. It went back to the history of Wonder Woman. So I never had an issue with it. I always, thought, okay, we're taking the lore and taking a new direction for storytelling reasons. And I'm always a fan of adding that back into the lore because you can always do stuff like this where you once again reinvent it, when the story calls for it. So that never really bothered me, but I prefer this. And I actually liked this storytelling version of it. But I jokingly always called it the Gumby version of Diana, but that was always the core of Diana's origin. The daughter of Zeus was not. That was not something that goes back historically. She was always made out of clay by the gods. And that goes back to her original origins. So I've always been a fan of this origin. This new version of it, this new variation on it, kind of similar where I didn't have an issue of the Zeus version. Similarly, I like the variations. This version actually is one where I'm like, wow, I really like how they modernized it and made it a storytelling element.
For me, this version actually makes me like this version better.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I liked about the daughter of Zeus storyline so much was that they fabricated the Gumby version to protect Diana from Hera's wrath of Hippolyta and Hera. Hippolyta and Zeus, going at it because Hera traditionally does not like the bastard children of Zeus,
Right.
And so they created that other story to protect Diana. I liked that. I thought that for me was a really neat element of the daughter of Zeus story. But I'll be honest with you. This version right here, this storytelling, the building to the story made me like this version better. I'm now a fan of the made from clay, the made from sand, the Gumby version of Diana's origin now because of this story. And it's not just because of this ending; it's because of they took so much time in these 3 issues to build this relationship that the Amazons had with their gods, had with their patrons, the patrons. It was something like, this right here 100% makes sense. This actually really does build it.
Did you ever read the Perez version of?
I've read parts of it. I've never actually sat down. I keep wanting to sit down and just take my time and go through all of that stuff. And I've never had a free moment when I can say, okay, it's time to start reading that. And I keep meaning to, and it's on my list of reads. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I know I have it around here, and there's many different ways I can get my hands on it and read it, and I just have to sit down and say, now is time.
It's terrific. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are of the Perez version because that was equally, terrific in its presentation. I really enjoyed this. From a 3-issue standpoint of this, I own this book multiple ways already because I bought the physical versions, but I also was buying it digitally on Comixology as it was coming out. And, I wanted it complete, from the Comixology version. I know I can read it just as easily on the DC app now, but I'm digital completionist too, where it's like I want everything.
Yes.
If I started buying it through Comixology, I want it all on Comixology. This one is well worth. I'm with you. I want the absolute version. I actually want to buy that coffee table that you're selling, where it's actually going to be that there's going to be an Amazon's Historia coffee table.
Yeah, I'm in.
This is a good read.
Nice work, Atom. What are these characters up to?
Our next discussion is going to be of Tales from Earth-6, a celebration of Stan Lee. Batman in Choked. Michael Uslan is the writer, Lee Weeks on art, Trish Mulvihill on colors, Clayton Cowles on letters. Superman in Make War No More. Mark Waid is the writer, Kevin Maguire on art, Rosemary Cheatham on colors, Troy Peteri on letters. Wonder Woman in To New Beginnings. Stephanie Williams is the writer. Belen Ortega on art. Jordi Belair on colors. Becca Carey on letters. The Flash in Palindrome. Becky Cloonan and Michael W. Conrad are writers. Pablo M. Collar on art. D. Cunniff, it's Cunniffe on colors. Steve Wands on letters. Green Lantern in Behold Necron. Kenny Porter on writing. Carl Mostert on art. Romulo Fajardo Jr. on colors. Dave Sharp on letters. Shazam in Contingency. Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing on writing. Juan Ferreira, Ferreyra on art and colors. Becca Carey on letters. Aquaman and Toiling the Titan's Tempest. Zach Thompson writing. Hayden Sherman on art. Nick Fildari on colors. Hassan Otsmain Elhaou on letters. Catwoman, The Cat and the Canary. Megan Fitzmartin on writing. Anthony Marquez on pencils. Mark Morales inks. Dave Stewart on colors. Pat Brousseau on letters. Sandman, Not Only in Dreams. Steve Orlando on writing. Max Dunbar on art. Sebastian Chang on colors. Steve Wands on letters. JLA in Trust. Jerry Ordway, writer and artist. Glenn Whitmore on colors. Pat Brousseau on letters. And apologies to any name butchering, because that's quite the creative team selection for this particular book, and I'm doing that a little bit differently just because of the sheer number of creators. What was your experience on the whole Just Imagine Stan Lee thing? Like, did you read those? What did that look like for you?
I read it, but I had no remembrance of it, to be honest with you. I didn't remember any of the characters, any of the variations on the different heroes and all that stuff. And I don't even remember when I read it, to be honest with you, whether I read it when it came out or when the podcast started. But I remember reading it thinking, it'd be kind of neat, Stan Lee's interpretation on it. But it wasn't anything. It was like, oh my God, this is, I have no memory of reading it or my reaction to it, to be honest with you. I was planning on, after this is done, going back and reading the original again, but I wanted to solely have my focus be this, so I didn't want the experience from reading the original to affect my comments on this book right now. So the plan is, after we're done talking about it, I'm going to reread the original, just because, again, I literally have no memory of it. It's a weird thing. Sometimes a book, it'll happen to me, and it's not even a statement. I'm not even saying, oh, that's a bad thing. No, I just, for whatever reason, when I was reading it, I was either doing something else that, had a prior focus, or it was so long ago that I just forgot, because that happens to me a lot.
Would you have read this then before we podcasted?
I thought I did, because that came out
2001.
Did that come out when we were in college, or did that come out after?
2001.
Okay, so that definitely would have been, the podcast would have got me reading it, to be honest.
We weren't podcasting then.
No, but when
I'm saying
podcasting.
Right.
Probably.
No, I guess what I'm saying is, we were going back to, did you actually read it when it was coming out? I guess that's the piece that...
I don't think it was when it came out. I read it after it had come out.
Okay.
So it was either, because there was a period in time when I was reading some comics after college, and I may have been at the comic shop and I may have seen it, a collection on it. Or my guess is when we first started podcasting, someone mentioned it, and I probably read it then. That's my guess on when I read this thing. I'm pretty sure I have a trade of it, and that's what I read, the trade on it.
They released multiple collections since we've been podcasting that we've shouted out on the show. So I'm
probably, that's when I probably read it. So I'm going to guess early podcast is when I actually read this.
So the premise behind the original Just Imagine Stan Lee in 2001 was, it was a monthly release of Stan Lee partnering up with famous creators for the purpose of, what would Stan Lee do if he was creating these characters? So blank slate. He could take any elements of the concepts that he wanted, completely rework them. basically make Stan Lee's version of these characters. What would it be like if it was done in the Stan Lee style? It was cool, at the time, as far as for a novelty. It's funny. My wife and I were talking about this morning before we recorded. She was like, what are you going to be talking about today? She's actually listened to the last couple episodes, which I really appreciated. So, I told her, and I said, it was this cool idea of like Stan Lee, who we've all grown up with on the Marvel side, being so involved with famous creators and crafting so many of the great Marvel characters that we know and love, that seeing his take on the DC characters was cool. This is a great homage because, oh my gosh, that is a who's who of creative talent right now that's involved in this celebration of Stan Lee. And I love that it's Earth 6. It's an Earth where we could get stories like this. I will say, just kind of general impressions of this, I love anthologies like this. I think this is a great way to deliver stories from Earth 6. Yeah, I would love to see another one of these, like this being something that they do annually or, every few years, depending on interest. I think what's really important is that you get this. I don't know how they gathered this creative talent together, like what was the draw to get this particular group. I felt the energy off of these stories. I felt like they were stories they were motivated to do. And they had some great ideas and concepts for each of their particular short stories in this. So each one of them was satisfying. Like, I really enjoyed this. I didn't know what to expect from it. I just went through, and I like anthologies like this because the way I read it was I would read like 2 and 3 stories at a time in a sitting and walk away and come back to it. And I really enjoy anthologies for that now. I don't feel with every anthology that I've got to read it cover to cover. I'll read it, digest it, and come back and read the rest of them. And this read really well like that. I have found that I do like Earth 6. Like, I want more stories there out of this, which I think is the big victory of all this is I don't want this to be the last I see of these characters. I would love to read more. I don't know that I necessarily want it monthly, if that makes sense. But yet, as a special treat like this, I would love to read more. To see them in a crossover at some point, I would love to see that. These are characters that I don't want shelved, I guess, is what I'm saying. I'd like to see them used and dusted off from time to time because I think they're interesting concepts for what they were. Which is interesting because they really were meant at the time to be Stan Lee's just Stan Lee having some fun playing with the DC toys. And I love that there's enough depth here that I want to see more from them, which is interesting. Where were you at, like, at the end of this? Like, did you want more? What was your kind of your take?
Well, the interesting thing on this one, again, I didn't remember anything I read before. So this kind of, for me, was the introduction of these characters. So my first read through, I was like, okay. Then my second read through, I enjoyed it more than I did my first read through. Then the third read through, again, it was like every time I was reading it, I was enjoying it more because I was seeing little other nuances. Like, oh, that's kind of neat. That's kind of neat. There are certain characters on this that I want to. Well, if they did another story, I 100% would do it, read it, and buy it again. That's not even a hesitation on getting another story on this. There are certain characters though that I would have liked to see an ongoing or multiple stories on. That's how actually really I got invested in with them by the end. And the character that's the biggest surprise for me on this one, that if you had said, hey, this is going to be the character you would latch onto, is the character I didn't latch onto was Superman. Now, I love the story, great story, but Superman as a person, I don't like this Superman. And it was kind of neat how I could enjoy the story and thought this was a great story, but this isn't my dun-da-da, this isn't my Superman. Mm-hmm. And that always throws me when it's not my Superman that I'm so used to, those core, Superman values that I always want, and someone who's got the big red S on their chest. Someone who, you call yourself Superman, you better be blank, and this guy is not that. And that really threw me. And it was funny because the first read through, I was like, what? Then the second read through, I'm like, okay. Third read, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get this guy. He's not my Superman, but I enjoyed the story. Now, the one that I really was like surprised on how much I enjoyed with multiple read-throughs was Green Lantern. Because he was another one when I first read it, I was like, this isn't the space cops. This isn't the thing. This isn't the stuff I love about what is a Green Lantern. But I was like, I'm thinking to myself, this is more Swamp Thing. And I loved how by the end, after, like, as I said, by the third read through, I was like, man, I want an ongoing story of this Green Lantern. I want to see more of this guy's connection to the Green. This is kind of a neat, cool story, and I really, latched on to Green Lantern, at the end of this. Now, as I said, overall, this is a very enjoyable read. I'm glad I have this, and it's, as I said, it has me motivated to read the original stuff again, just so I can remember it, and see how this compares to that. So it's kind of a neat experience. And again, the multiple read-throughs that we do for the podcast, is something why I do it when I'm not even dealing with a book we're going to talk on the podcast. I always do multiple read-throughs because literally with these stories, I enjoyed them every time I read it. Every time I read it, I enjoyed it and appreciated it. I would notice something a little different, a little nuance maybe that I didn't catch before. It was something that I was like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I actually like the way that you kind of stumbled over that we have to do for the podcast, because we don't have to do them for the podcast. We never said like, hey, you've got to do 3 read-throughs for the podcast, that type of thing. Yeah. I think it's just kind of a thing that has naturally become a part of some of our preparation just because we like doing it. I feel more prepared for the conversation when I've explored different avenues of a particular book. But that was never a thing that we said, hey, in order to do your homework for the podcast, this is how you have to approach it. To your point, some of that's become preference for me, and it looks a little different when I'm doing it in my regular, like, casual reading, books that I'm enjoying. But there's very rarely a book now where I do one read through. I usually do some form of paging through again, or 2 and 3 times, just because there's something more I want to see from the story. And that's come out of specifically how we end up reading for this out of preference. I'm looking at the Batman Choked story right now as we're chatting. And that, to your point, there were things that I remembered from reading these through originally, but it's been so long. Like, I don't know that I reread them after the original release. Like, I own it in a collected edition, but I think it's one of those that's in the stockpile. So I read these through when they came out. All of them, because, anytime they released a new one with Stan Lee, doing it, I wanted to see his take. I was incredibly intrigued, and he was working with top talent. So I'm like, this is going to be interesting. And like any Elseworlds kind of thing, I really just enjoyed it. It read like just an interesting, cool Elseworlds. So there were things and concepts that I loosely remembered, and there were other things where they started to come back through the read, or the story developed it. This Batman one is a great example. It's a very different take on Batman. Choker, to a certain extent, I'm sitting here like, this is such a Stan Lee thing, in its like whole take. And I really loved seeing that version. I liked this Batman's costume, and, kind of the reality of the fact that during the fight, Batman, his costume kind of made him sort of this night beast, this fear in the fact that he is he human? Is he animal? What is he? Really playing into this criminals or superstitious cowardly lot concept in how they were doing it, and how Choker humanizes him, by he gets the mask off, and it really is saying that you're a simple mere mortal like me, and is playing off of that piece, which I really enjoyed seeing in this story. That was more the power than actually him carrying on who that person was that was under there. It was more the revelation of, this guy isn't superpowered, he's human, and I thought that was a cool little twist. Usually it's the finding out who is the most important part. In this case, it was like a taking of power to a certain extent that I really enjoyed, that I thought was a different sort of rich take on this thing.
And it's funny, as of all of the looking at all the characters, he's the one that is the most similar to the current universe.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting take, that how didn't dramatically alter Batman. Batman has made some changes on who Batman is, made changes on Gotham, etc. But in his core, he is still just this person who dresses as the Bat, who fights crime and a vigilante. And I liked how within the story, again, I still had a very comfort level with who he is. Different name, no Alfred, which is never a good thing because Alfred's awesome. But again, his different, but his connection with the police is a little bit, there is a more ease to his dealings with them, but it's not as it is in the universe. Because I like how again, he risks himself to save the person that the trigger happy cops are shooting at, and even the commissioner, Commissioner Jordan, which again, that was kind of a funny note for me. I was like, that's awesome. But again, it's the whole, connection, how there is still that friendship, there is that building of it, but it's not the same.
He had a Frederick.
Yeah, Frederick, not an Alfred.
Yeah. I actually really liked the fact that he didn't feel beholden to putting in all the tropes that DC had. It was really his take on it. And you're right. I think because Stan Lee really, especially in the Marvel style early on, he and the creators at Marvel who were putting those characters together, they were so grounded, and that was kind of the difference between DC and Marvel. It was surprising that his Batman was, a lot closer to at first, but then when you think about it, it makes kind of sense, doesn't it? When you take a look at characters like Daredevil and Batman, and Daredevil and Spider-Man and people like that were more street level, that his Batman would kind of play off of that. Superman, I'm sorry, did you have something more about Batman?
I was going to quick comment on it, because I'll be honest with you, when I was thinking this, you mentioned Daredevil, and Spider-Man, both of them have superpowers. And that's what I was actually expecting this version of Batman to have some type of alteration, some type of genetic manipulation or something like that. I wasn't expecting him to be a 100% mere mortal man who puts on a head of a bat. Yeah, I was expecting there'd be some type of genetic modifications to him. So I kind of like that.
The Superman story is a really good one. I'm with you. He's not likable.
Yes.
But yet I love that Mark Waid and Kevin Maguire embraced that this was Stan's version of him. Let's play with this version and really expand on it. And, what is this Superman like in this world? And he's very driven by his own motivations, right? I like that they did bring in things like a Supermobile and stuff like I do like their version of the Supermobile.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool that they brought those elements in. But Superman's reasoning for doing everything that he's doing is he's trying to move the Earth forward so that way research can get in place where he can get home, and hopefully get off the planet. So when there's things that our planet's doing that are counterproductive to forward movement as a society, he has a reason to insert himself and use his powers to push the needle forward, where it's not necessarily for these altruistic reasons. He's doing it, there's some selfish motivations there, but he is critical of our society. And it's interesting to see this take on Superman. I really liked the story. I'm with you. I don't necessarily like the guy because he's not my Superman. I'm with you, but if somebody were to put out another anthology of this and there's another Superman story, you better darn well believe I'd be excited to read it.
Oh God, yeah. Again, I don't like him, but I like the story.
Yeah.
And I like how they crafted it. And again, they very easily could have, made him just, an evil version of Superman, for lack of better terms. Just how he's more focused on his own personal life. And because that's the big thing about Superman is he sacrifices so much for people. This guy does not do that. And this guy, his sole purpose of doing everything, any good that he does is for him. It's not for the people. It's not for Earth. And I like how, and it's one of those things that makes him not likable, but I like seeing how they crafted the story and why he starts changing up, where he's like, hey, and it was funny that it's Olsen who's the one who points out to him saying, hey, you're squandering all your stuff on just, you've got to go after the source. Go after the people who get rich off of war. If you don't want war to happen, you've got to go after the profiteers, the war profiteers. And again, as he said that, I was like, oh, this is not going to end well for somebody. And sure enough, you flip the page and it doesn't, And another thing I like about this Superman is that he isn't as powerful as our Superman. He's stronger, he's faster, but he doesn't have the same kind of powers that that Clark has. So this guy is powerful, yes, but he's not as all powerful. He needs the buggy to fly. He needs some of his technology and stuff like that to actually do what he's doing. Whereas Clark is just Clark. So it's kind of neat how they make him super powerful, but they don't, they didn't make him all powerful like Superman actually is.
What do you think of the Wonder Woman story? I
absolutely loved the Wonder Woman story.
Me too.
100% loved it. And again, this is one where she's very close. You can actually even say this is, would be what if one of the lost tribes of the Amazon became Wonder Woman? And that's kind of how I was, you look at it, where, it didn't have the same, her same origin. Things are a little different. She's a little different as to who she is. She's got a secret identity, which I thought was kind of cool, and just everything about this. But there's still that core being of who Wonder Woman is. They held on to, and there's some really neat stuff going on with her.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the story of, she also, and to a certain extent, she's kind of the Superman of this world. In the sense that I really feel like she's a tried and true hero with like really strong, good intentions, where she's just trying to make a difference and do things right in both roles, I think. And, it's interesting with her working at the National Exposer and, being involved in these type of stories and trying to really navigate the world in general. And I also love that when she's Wonder Woman, she's the same person, meaning her beliefs, her emotions, her core values are the same in both roles. She doesn't transform into some different entity or something. So we get to see her kind of both in and out of the costume be the same person. I really liked her role. Frostine, I thought was a great villain. I thought it was a very cool story. You've got to get a lot in these short little offerings in order to give you kind of a vibe for the world. But I also felt like when that story was done, I was like, wait, there isn't another couple. I wanted another couple pages. I wanted to read more. That was the one I would say it was the first story out of the three. Not that I didn't like the other two, but I got everything I wanted out of the other two. This one I was like, but give me a little more. This is getting intriguing now. I want to know her story.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because when you said she's this world's version of Superman, I was thinking the same thing. She is their kind of variations on it, where she is the hero who is doing it for the right reasons, and with this secret identity that she's got to protect. And the same thing how Clark always had to protect his identity, and just again, this is another story where I would love to see this story continuing because again, she's looking at her life now. So now we've got stories of her as Wonder Woman, but we also have, just her as a person trying to figure out her life, trying to, put some stuff on her social calendar and try to actually live. And that for me would tell a really cool story that I would continue reading. Now she's, again, she is one of the ones that if they were to say an ongoing series of her, I would pick that up in a heartbeat. With the Superman, I would need him in an anthology. Her, I would go solo story.
Yeah, I would read that too.
Because I think there's a lot of depth you can do with her as a hero, as a person. And I think that, for me, I know that, and you as well, I know, in and out of the costume, give me something that I can sink my teeth into. Those are the stories and the characters I love. She's one of those characters that in and out of the costume, 100%. For me, I would read that in a heartbeat.
Did you read Promethea by Alan Moore?
No.
It's an absolute. I've collected all the absolutes they've gone on. They've collected Promethea in an absolute edition. But, I mean, it's been collected in a lot of different ways. It's part of that America's Best Comics line that didn't start off as a DC line. It was when DC acquired Wildstorm, I believe, is how that came about. It became part of the DC line. But Promethea is an amazing story. And I'm not saying this is cookie cutter like Promethea and this Wonder Woman is exactly the same. But it has that vibe where I really found the Promethea's take on the Wonder Woman type of concept as intriguing and unique. It was its own unique spin, but it was this kind of exploration. And I felt like this had that same kind of core where wow, this is a different enough take on it that I want to see where this would go. Like, I think there's some legs here, and this concept could really, to your point, be a monthly. I would read that monthly. I like the Flash story a lot. And it had a lot of, you know me, I'm a time travel story junkie.
Yeah.
So this had a lot of that piece. I liked what it did differently, though. And what it did differently was sometimes there's that futility of going, or this concept that like going back through time is futile. You're not going to be able to change things, where this wasn't that. What the character realized, kept going back in time for a specific goal of trying to stop father's death, but instead realized that I did make a mark going back in time. All those times I was going back there, I was saving my dad. I was saving myself unknowingly, that I was actually making a change and altering the past. So, because to me, it's always like, well, but if you were there and you did things, of course, there would be some form of after effect of that. And that doesn't always happen in time travel stories. I thought this did a great concept of saying, yeah, you couldn't stop the end result of becoming the Flash. And ultimately the death of the father, which was, hey, if dad doesn't die, I don't become Flash. But that's the end game that I'm looking for. It just didn't have, that wasn't the way this story was going to go. But I did love the fact that it had also this really cool moment where the dad finds out, the dad realizes, wait a minute, you're my kid. And that was so cool that 18 years ago at the hospital, I thought that was really a great sequence where the dad's still going to be motivated to try and save the mom, still do, his part. But in the case of daughter, you get to see this idea that, was it the son or daughter? It's daughter, right? Daughter, right? Yeah. You get to see this idea that the daughter was like driven to like continue on and to continue being the Flash. I really enjoyed it. It was, to me, the hook for this one that made this one very different was this concept of you can change the past, maybe not these big pivotal events. Like the dad has to die in order for all these things to happen, right? Because if she never becomes the Flash, she can't manipulate the past and cause all of these things. Like it wouldn't have gotten as far in the dad's lifeline. The dad wouldn't have made it to that point to inject her if it hadn't been for her going in the past and stopping certain things from happening. The dad would have died sooner, if not for her involvement. It's the which came first, the chicken or the egg. Yeah. I love these wacky, timey stories like this. Now, I love those kind of things. Sometimes you don't. How is this for you? Because I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, a lot of times I do have issues with the timey-wimey stuff. And I'll be honest with you, this one laid it out perfectly that I 100% enjoyed this. I'm right along with you. I'm laughing and nodding my head with everything you're saying. I liked how as she goes back farther and she's changing more and she's basically strengthening the fact that she's going to become Flash, that dad is going to, it was what, hyper-activated hummingbird genetics or something like that is what gave her the speed. And I liked how each time, but I also liked the little modifications to the costume as she's going through.
Yeah.
And it's little variations, nothing too major. Part of it is she's got the full faceplate and then loses part of her faceplate. So now she's got the open mouth and it's, and as time goes on, she's got the open mouth, by the end of it. And I loved how the beginning shows her rescuing the one dog from the burning building. The end shows her again rescuing the burning dog from the building. But this time she's got that little locket that her father wanted for her, that was her mother's that her father wanted to give to her. So now she's got that locket, and now that's part of the costume. So they throughout time and throughout her experiences and different stuff she's doing, she's changing stuff. And again, it was a really neat little usage of the weird time stuff, the time travel, the timey-wimey stuff. And it was kind of a neat display. But the one thing I really liked was her explanation on certain stuff on with being super fast. You really do have to be careful on how you punch somebody. You hit at the wrong angle and bye-bye bones in your hand, bye-bye wrist. It's all shattered, and there's little stuff like that it was kind of a neat, exploration on her because, again, she's a young hero. She's learning these powers as she's going along. she's trying to figure this out. She doesn't have the great training montages. This is her training montage going through time. And it was kind of a neat way of who she is and what she's all about.
Mary Maxwell is her name, too, and it was originally created by Stan Lee and Kevin McGuire. So just an interesting sort of piece, because I was like looking for a name in there, and I'm like, we didn't really see her name. But it was an interesting sort of piece. So the Green Lantern story, and this is one you started to allude to earlier, how much you enjoyed the Green Lantern story, and this was one that really grew on me in the second read-through, when I went through and really enjoyed it. I liked it at first, don't get me wrong. It's just a different sort of take on Green Lantern. I loved the fact that they brought in this universe's version of Necron.
Yeah.
And just how Green Lantern needed to tap into like kind of this idea of roots and, you know, being everybody being interconnected. Green Lantern couldn't do this on his own. He needed to tap into the belief and the thoughts and of others, and to pull that to really get the strength of life from it. And I love that even the guy before, who was completely disinterested in helping out, you know, the guy who just like bumbled past, he became, in the end, like kind of bought in, like drank the Kool-Aid.
He was one of the catalysts. Yeah. That was a really cool usage. And again, it was funny because, you know me and the Green Lantern, I love the Corps.
Yeah.
I love that notion of the intergalactic police force working together. And I always loved that. And this really threw me when I was first reading it because, again, it's that connection to the tree of life and all that. And I'm like, more of a Swamp Thing thing kind of thing. And that was going on. And it was a weird look for me just because of I kind of had more vibe of the Hulk and this kind of stuff that was going on. And it really threw me. And then I started reading through it. The still connection of the Corps is still there. Mm-hmm. It is that, but it's not just a Green Lantern Corps. It's all of us and all of our connection to life and the life essence that we have. And that's the true power of the tree of life. The Necron is the anti-life. And it was like, this is a really cool story. I liked it. And it was one of those things where the second and third reading through, I was really going, man, this is a neat character. I like this guy. I like Glenn. I want to read more of Glenn, you know? I
like the idea of the tree, because you're right, it incorporates elements of Swamp Thing. And I like the idea of, from death comes life, and this idea of this new tree being the centerpiece over there where, he stopped the end of everything by all of us working together. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, and I like how Necron has some of the Black Lantern, imagery to it.
Yep.
And again, it's the swinging the big old axes because he's taking out a tree. So what's best to take out a tree but an axe? So there's a lot of neat stuff with Necron as well. This is one of those things where I was like, this is a cool usage of what was laid out initially to what is currently done. Again, it's one of those things where one of the reasons I'd like to see more of this character, to see how additional stuff. Would there ever be a Yellow Lantern? Would they ever do something like that? Could they have other colors in this universe? And what would they be sourced from? Because this is the source from the Tree of Life. Would the Yellow Lantern or the Red Lantern have some source like that? And it's kind of an interesting, thought of what would happen.
So as a kid, I used to play Shazam. All the time, because it was that 70s live action show was on there, and it was, you go Shazam, and you throw on like a towel, the towel, and like all of a sudden you're Shazam and running around the neighborhood, right? Very real thing from my childhood because I was that young at that time. Not that I wouldn't do that now, but
we still do it now.
Yeah, but
every time we do it, we're like Shazam,
right?
Nope, not this time.
But this is not a Shazam I'd want to be, and I loved the creep factor of this. There was a creep factor. So very, very different take on what it means to become this different sort of entity. I really liked also the new take on Mr. Mind in this. I liked that this was an agent, and you get to see that kind of spy thriller kind of action going in there, leading into a superhero story. It just had a really different take. This is another one that I would love to read more of. I was really drawn into this world because I see the possibilities of following his story when he's not Shazam and following his story when he is, and how different that is. I think he's just as intriguing in the James Bond mode as he is in this. I really enjoyed the take on this. boy, this beast like Shazam, though, oh my gosh, the destructive nature. I mean, he's kind of like all those brains are out there, all those minds, and he was just destroying all of them.
Squishing them. Yes. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Mind's brain was also squished. I don't think this Shazam is has an issue killing.
No. I mean, the look on his face at the end where it's done, we're done, target eliminated, contingency secured, and now walk it off. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. And you could see that this is having a psychological reaction on him. I thought that was really, really great where, it was almost like he has some trauma after all this, what he was just a part of. And I really liked that, this idea. It's kind of almost like a mixture of Shazam and the Hulk in an interesting sort of way, where, and how much, I would love further explanation of how much of that's him, how much of it isn't, and what that really looks like. There's an interesting character piece in this to explore further. I read
this as two different people.
Completely?
When he's Shazam, he's not him.
But
it's a completely different entity.
But when he's afterwards, there's a reaction to it.
No, I think he remembers everything, but I don't think he's in control.
See, and I agree that he's not in control, but what really is going on there? I think there's a story to be told. Do you feel like you clearly understand what that relationship is?
Oh, no. And again, he's one of those that it would be kind of some neat, they could do some neat stories with him, just the psychological dealings of being Shazam and having Shazam, eat people maybe even, and him just dealing with the horrors. Because you're right, and the thing where he's like, it's done. It's done. We're done. Target eliminated, contingency secured. The look on his face is oh boy, and he's covered in blood. So it's not even like when the transformation happens, the blood's on the other guy. No, the blood's on him too.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's covered in various people's blood and brain matter because he was crushing skulls. So it's there. So he 100% knows what happens. But I don't think he's in the driver's seat. I think he's in the passenger seat when he's Shazam. And I think that is part of the neat psychological stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think it's a really, really cool take, and I would be interested in reading more. Aquaman. So talk about a different sort of Aquaman. Aquaman actually becomes this water entity, which was an interesting sort of piece over there. It's a very, very different take on Aquaman.
And the thing with Aquaman, and this is another one of those, when I first read it, I was like, I don't know, why would he do that? And I was like, because he has had Atlantis, and he's had Namor in the Marvel universe. Why would Stan do this? And it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know how I felt about it, but again, multiple read-throughs, you do see a cool hero,
mm-hmm.
And you do see a neat, kind of character. So I didn't have an issue with the story being told. I didn't have an issue with the hero because, again, this is another true hero, dramatically different than Aquaman, dramatically different than Arthur. And I don't have a problem with that because, again, this is this hero. He is a water hero. It's kind of like, Zan, from the Wonder Twins.
Sure.
This is a cool version of Zan, and I was like, that's kind of a neat character. And I like how, again, this hero handles the problem, how he actually dealt with what is going on. And it was neat in this story that this has an ending, but it says the end ? Because there are these people watching him. Who are these masked figures watching Aquaman? What were they talking about? The lure worked perfectly. I was like, that's kind of neat. That made me wonder, are they going to do more stories? Or is that just the way they wanted to tell the story, that leave it open? I don't know, but I liked it. And I was like, that's kind of cool.
I think the other piece, too, is you kind of answered it with your Batman piece, right? Where you were sitting here saying, well, but look at Spider-Man, look at Daredevil and their powers and things like that. Whereas Batman, he did something stripped back where this was just a man. I in this particular case, there was an experimentation with dolphin DNA that led to this. With the idea of can humans breathe underwater? Right. And it led to this transformation piece, but he wasn't recreating Namor, if that makes sense. I think you're right. Like, he had Namor. So it's like, well, if I've already got Namor, what would I do with this kind of concept? And he and Scott McDaniel came up with this. I really enjoyed, he tackled this whole piece where I've got to keep following this thing. How do I do it if there's no water? can I travel through the rain? I thought the traveling through the rain thing was way cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was a neat idea. And also, I love how, as he's going along, he's saving people. Because that's a hero thing. You got to do that. While he's trying to get to the source, he sees someone hurting, he catches them. He does this, he does that, and he bobs and weaves and saves people. That was a really good thing to show this hero as.
I like their take on talking to fishes, too. Where it's like, can you talk to fish? I thought it was a cool little wink and nod. The power structure was really, really cool. It was a different sort of friendlier character. I actually like that each of these characters had a different interaction with the world, a different interaction and personality. I actually found that I enjoyed this take on Aquaman more even in this issue than its original presentation. I think just kind of advancement of the story. The next piece, the Catwoman piece, I thought was so awesome. Not only did it further the Catwoman story, but introduced Black Canary into this universe, the Cat and Canary. And I like how, they started off as rivals at first, but then along the way, there became like this mutual respect and friendship that almost came out of the whole thing. It was a different sort of story. I loved the artwork on it because obviously it's very reminiscent of some of my, favorite comic artists. It goes back to kind of like that Batman the Animated Series kind of sort of style to it.
Yeah.
A little bit of Darwin Cook too, yet its own spin. I really like every so often and I think this is the right kind of story for this particular art style. It was a really good art team choice for this. I really found myself liking the characters, and I like her costume, and I like that she had to make the decision. So do I reveal I'm Catwoman here or do I not? And she had to make that choice of saving people's lives is more important, so let me do that. So the girl knows she's Catwoman now.
And she's a genetic one.
Right.
I like that. The fact that this isn't just a cat burglar like we have in our universe. This is a mutant, for lack of better terms. This is actually an enhanced person. She transformed. That's not a costume. That's her physical form that she turns into. And I thought that, for me, was kind of a neat thing, a neat variation on who Catwoman is.
Steve Orlando as a writer, I really liked when he was doing a lot more with DC. And really like his take on Stan Lee's version of Sandman. Like, this was a great story because really Sandman was in some ways trapped in this kind of machine until we get to see Sandman kind of start interacting with the dreams and what was going on. I really liked how the dream stories were interplaying into, especially with the dog and what happened with the kid getting hit by the truck, and that he's constantly having this dream over and over again of it. I thought was a really cool take on that. I love these stories involving dreams. I think they go back to, Childhood with Nightmare on Elm Street and those type of things. When you got a hero that's interacting with the dreamverse, you get that kind of thing. This was a very cool take, Sandman. Like, it's a character that I just liked a lot.
Yeah, I like this one. This was a neat. This is another one that if they were to do more stories on it, I would 100% jump on it.
Yeah,
because again, it's that interesting, idea that whether you're asleep or awake, the dream universe is still going on. Mm-hmm. There's still that, and so Sandman has a job to do, whether you're awake or asleep. And I thought that for me was a neat idea and a neat concept behind this character. He's one of the ones that I was like, I want to read the original of this to see, what Stan said about this guy, how Stan laid him out.
I would read this Justice League monthly.
Yes, we do.
I mean, look at that lineup. This Wonder Woman, this Green Lantern, this Superman, this Batman, this Flash, and this Shazam. I mean, it is quite the lineup. Yeah. And it is not your father's Justice League. Let's be very, very clear off of that. Jerry Ordway did a great job with this. This is really cool.
Well, and this Lois Lane, I love how this Lois Lane isn't the Lois that we know and love.
Right.
We saw that in the Superman story where he exposed her secret identity for the paycheck,
Yes.
And in this one, she is, just this, she's trying to make as much money as she can off of the Justice League. So it's kind of a neat just take on her as well.
Jerry Ordway it was Stanley and Jerry Ordway creating the Justice League for that original offering. So Jerry Ordway was actually directly involved in the original interpretation of this. So this really is, I guess, you could say if there's a tried and true continuation, this clearly is one of those. That's a really cool continuation. I like that Green Lantern was the chair.
Yeah.
From the voting piece, instead of going to the traditional Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman, I like that it was this Green Lantern wound up being the chair.
It makes sense that he would be him.
Oh yeah,
because nobody likes the Superman, and Batman's very standoffish, so he wouldn't either Green Lantern or Wonder Woman would be the two people I would think would get the vote.
Right. I like that she's got to deal with questioning Lois Lane's motives. But if they knew about what I do for my job, what would they feel about me?
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, adding to the whole secret identity that she has.
Yep.
This universe, they don't know each other's secret identities. They don't know who they are. And again, I like it. I don't know if I would trust this Superman with my secret identity if I had it, especially if I was Wonder Woman. Because, again, the exposure has done a lot of comments on that one.
This Snapper car was interesting because it's a very today Snapper car where it's all about public image and like how do we get around the fact that we've got a negative public image right now. So they start to put something in place that is, it was put on by Lois as far as putting on a show, for the reporters and, really to put that piece up. And they make the decision as a team to let's be transparent here on what's happening. So we're going to tell you all the truth, and our goal right now is to make sure you aren't duped. You need to be able to trust us. That transparency piece was really cool, in the choice. I like that the story went to the place that it needed to go, where that is so what would happen today, right? A stunt would be put in place for the purpose of, hey, come here, look at us. We're the Justice League. You should be supporting us, that type of thing. And in the end, I really enjoyed the take of them coming clean and deciding what their identity was going to be. And Snapper Car being back there, I'm not quite sure what Snapper Car did for their publicity there. Because it was them coming clean. What
Snapper's doing is Snapper's going to fix up this mess. And he's now going to help Lois. Lois is his next project.
Right.
So it's interesting, the PR stuff. And one of the things I
loved it. I love the PR stuff because of the fact that I'm still convinced. I'm sitting here wondering, Snapper didn't really do a lot there, other than the fact that he's going to take this ball and run with it.
One of the things I loved about this sequence when they're doing their press conference, it's when Flash is talking. Mm-hmm. About the world becomes too cynical. We get it. The JLA needs to be your ray of hope. We hereby pledge to earn your trust back, whatever it takes. In the audience, one of the people, that looks like a young Stan Lee to me. I think that's supposed to be young Stan Lee.
Oh, I see what you're talking about there. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of a neat thing to actually put into the audience. So.
Yeah. I wonder if that was an homage. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it was funny. I was going through to see if I could see versions of Stan Lee in each of the stories, and that was the only one I saw. So I don't know if they didn't put him in every one or what they did. So I was like, it's kind of cool.
So at the end, and we're not going to go through each one, but one of the things that they did real well, they did a who's who at the end, and they had the original artist from the original story, the artwork from the original story in there. So, the Batman was Joe Kubert, the Superman was John Buscema. We had Stan Lee and Jim Lee with Wonder Woman, which that's a gorgeous looking take on Wonder Woman. Kevin McGuire with The Flash. We had Dave Gibbons with Green Lantern. Gary Frank with Shazam. I mean, I'm a huge Gary Frank fan, and that's just beautiful artwork. We have the Scott McDaniel on the Aquaman. Chris Bachalo, who I love Chris Bachalo's artwork. His Catwoman was a very cool one. Walter Simonson. I forgot that it was Walter Simonson and Stan Lee that created that Sandman concept. And then, of course, Jerry Ordway with JLA. I like that they put those who's who at the end, especially for people. If this is your first exposure to this, you're given everything you need in this to successfully navigate this Earth-6 world. I really enjoyed it.
Now, in the JLA one, they have that interesting thing where they're like, the A in the JLA may not stand for America for long, but that's a tale for another time. Mm-hmm. So that tells me we're going to get more from Earth 6, and I want to see that.
Yeah. But really enjoyed this. I'm glad we got a chance to do this one.
We are crystal men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
I would like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address. You prefer to contact us that way. We love having you part of our show. RagingBullets.com is our show website, and it feeds into Twitter. It feeds into our Facebook fan page. We are proud to be part of an amazing Facebook group community, and that's where our Speeding Bullets segment comes from, but it's also conversations around comics and all kinds of pop culture over there, and I want to thank all the great people for... That's one of my first go-to places to find out news and happenings around, so I want to thank everyone that keeps posting articles over there because that's where I go to get my news first and foremost. And it's always safe conversation, positive conversation, which I really appreciate. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what's going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Multiversity. Harley screws up the DCU, issue 1 of 6, 50% off, only $249. We have Unstoppable Doom Patrol 1 of 6, 50% off, $199. And we have Waller vs. Wildstorm, issue 1 of 4, 50% off, only $299. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, I just want to remind everyone once again, log in, sign up, and make an account. And you can use the Coming Soon section as a way to start keeping track of hardcovers and trade paperbacks, collected editions that are upcoming that you want to fit into your budget. And that's a great way to do it because the nice part is they have expected release dates there. So you can kind of balance that out. I know for me, it's kind of like, okay, I have a little disposable income here and I want to get some books. It's a great way to grab them. I've also started giving these as gifts. And the advantage of being able to look ahead and see what's coming out is I start using that as a way to kind of strategize throughout the year, grabbing stuff for Christmas and birthday presents for friends of mine that I know are casual comic fans, but I'm trying to find books and grab books that I know fit their tastes. Movies, TV shows, things like that they watch. And this is a great way for me to kind of strategize that as well on that list. So I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be back, and we're going to take our first look at Lazarus Planet with a focus on Lazarus Planet Alpha and a quick take on Assault on Krypton. And we're going to celebrate Nightwing by taking a look at issue 100. We will see you then.
Bye.
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Raging Bullets time is here. We talk about what we hold dear. Comic books and TV shows. Superheroes and their clothes. Justice League and so much more. I just love Green Lantern Corps. We talk about the books we've read with spoilers straight ahead.
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it. What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that.
I think
Sean,
it's right
Jim,
there.
how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's not